A new era is upon us. An era created by Liu Kang to fix everything that went wrong. But how did we get here? Why has this series had the reboot twice over? Because NetherRealm Studios can't write. Thank you, see you next time. Okay, so you want something more in depth? I'll oblige. Mortal Kombat, like any long-running series, has had its fair share of ups and downs. The mid-90s was probably when the franchise was at the peak of its popularity. But after the release of Mortal Kombat 4, the franchise began to go through a decline. The failure of the Mortal Kombat Annihilation movie being a clear sign that things weren't the same anymore. So for 5 years the series was on ice. But Deadly Alliance seemed to reinvigorate the franchise by taking risks, and it paid off. But then the 3D era slowly petered out before ending with Armageddon, which was seen as okay, I guess. But let's elaborate on those points. Deadly Alliance took huge risks. It killed off series main hero Liu Kang in the intro. That was a clear sign that Midway was willing to rock the status quo. Deadly Alliance also expanded the lore in ways the original arcade games weren't able to do. Although John Tobias did have ambitions that he couldn't reach with the limitations of arcade development. John Tobias left Midway shortly after the completion of Mortal Kombat 4, and while Special Forces was in development, which is what caused that game to come out so incomplete. He had different plans for Mortal Kombat 5, namely that the protagonist was going to be Liu Kang, Kitana's son, who, after his father's death, would find out more about his father's legacy and come into conflict with Reiko, who in this story would have been Shao Kahn's reincarnation. These plans never panned out, as John Vogel would take over writing the game's narratives following Tobias' departure. Things seemed great at first as Deadly Alliance and Deception expanded the lore, such as revealing the existence of the Dragon King, the original Emperor of Outworld, and the One Being, effectively the reason for the universe's existence. Also, some teases were dropped. Remember the Liu Kang sprite that was on fire in Mortal Kombat 2? That was actually this guy, Blaze, who was on some vaguely defined quest that we didn't know much about, because Vogel probably didn't know at the time either. At some point, Ed Boon decided to make Mortal Kombat 7, which was Armageddon, a Everyone is Here game. Every character who had been in the series to that point was coming back for the ultimate final battle. Blaze's quest turned out to be to prevent Armageddon with two new characters who he had never met before, Taven and Dagon being the key to the round's salvation. Unfortunately, Armageddon didn't exactly feel like much of a finale. All endings for the characters were what if this character was the one to defeat Blaze, which didn't give any sense of closure, as well as the fact that Taven's ending was confirmed to have done nothing to stop Armageddon. Thus, for a grand finale, it didn't really feel like one. After that came the DC Universe crossover, a game that made everybody go, huh, when it was announced? But from what I've been able to tell, the original plan for After Armageddon was to do a next generation type of story, with only Scorpion and Sub-Zero returning. But after Midway went bankrupt and Warner Bros. Bought the Mortal Kombat franchise, the decision was made to reboot and essentially retell the story of the first three games. And why not? Those three games are considered to be the golden age of Mortal Kombat. The premise we were given was that instead of Taven, Shao Kahn had won Armageddon with everybody else dying. But Raiden is able to send a message back in time to his past self from the original game, but it only gives a vague "he must win," which his past self is left to interpret. The retelling of the first three MK games in this cinematic story mode is a very condensed version, with a lot of changes either because of Raiden's actions or without explanation, like Mileena being born during Mortal Kombat 2 instead of already existing. But what really brings the story mode down for me is NetherRealm's writers rely heavily on shock value storytelling, which in the 90s was one of the worst parts of comic books. For example, it all starts when Sub-Zero is made a cyborg instead of Smoke, but NetherRealm was never going to let their second most iconic character stay a cyborg forever. So he was just obviously a one-game thing, which begs the question of why do it at all. Then Kung Lao is killed for shock value. Then everybody except Johnny Cage and Sonya are killed by Sindel in a scene that feels straight out of Countdown to Final Crisis or Ultimatum. Then Liu Kang is accidentally killed by Raiden, which leaves Raiden with a meager 2 warriors. While those who were killed are now undead revenants who serve Quan Chi and Shinnok for the upcoming invasion, thus setting up a retelling of Mortal Kombat 4. So in a way, we are effectively back where we started, with almost everyone dead. So essentially, in this story mode alone, the writers have made the exact same mistakes that caused them to have to reboot in the first place. Some never learn, do they? Now, from what I've been able to gather, the writers' entire goal was to turn Liu Kang against Raiden, as a way to make him more interesting. So everything was all about getting to the point where Liu Kang turns on Raiden, and that meant they had to get everybody killed to do it. But all the characters were made undead generic revenants. Now, why would you turn a good chunk of your unique, varied cast and generic revenants isn't something I will ever understand. We'll come back to what they did to Liu Kang and Kitana in a bit. Johnny Cage was spared because the writers clearly wanted to evolve him from being comic relief, and they wanted his kid to be the new hero of the new generation, and Sonya was spared because Cage's kid needed a mom. That's just my takeaway from the whole thing, but it would make sense. A few years later, we get Mortal Kombat X, which largely skips over Shinnok's invasion after the first chapter, but they were unable to free the remnants. We cut to 25 years later, and most of the focus is on the Kombat kids. Cassie Cage, daughter of Johnny Cage and Sonya, Kung Jin, cousin of Kung Lao, Jackie, daughter of Jax, and Takeda, son of Kenshi. They're okay at best and forgettable at worst. Cassie is obviously designed to appeal to the younger demographics, the Zoomer generation. The Cage family is basically given a poorly defined green magic power that activates when a loved one is in danger, which is how both Johnny and Cassie are able to defeat Shinnok. Meanwhile, while the Cage family gets to happily reconcile, how are former main hero and heroine Liu Kang and Kitana? They're still remnants, and at the end of the day are shown to be ruling the Netherrealm together, while Raiden has become dark again. So we are essentially right back to where we were at the end of Deception. Liu Kang is an undead creature, and Raiden has been corrupted. I read an article in Medium that said, Dead Liu Kang and Dark Raiden herald the end of a Mortal Kombat timeline. And it's true, they do. But in regards to Liu Kang and Kitana, once our main hero and heroine, I've noticed that NetherRealm really tends to like the fallen hero trope. Just look at how they portray Superman and Wonder Woman in the Injustice games. It's pretty similar to this, but that's another story. Don't believe me? 2 of the guest DLC characters in Combat Pack 1 for MK1 are essentially evil Superman, which is all I know about those 2 characters. And somebody basically told me about NetherRealm, they're edgelords. Yeah, they pretty much are. They wear it on their sleeves. I also suspect Brian Chard, who was the writer for this game, didn't like Liu Kang and Kitana very much, since he makes them as unpleasant as possible, despite them supposed to be at their core a nice guy and girl respectively, but I'll get deeper into that some other time. Also, of all the more interesting characters stuck as remnants, most of the focus is on the Special Forces characters, which was always the least interesting part of MK lore in my opinion. What made MK lore so interesting was its diverse and varied cultures. It was like the series was moving away from its Asian influences and just going full-blown American propaganda. Mortal Kombat 11 saw a change in writers. Who was writer of the Mortal Kombat X comic book recalled making a few pitches for MK11. One was a Dark Raiden and Revenant Liu Kang teaming up, but Ed Boon doesn't really like Dark Raiden, merely saying, that's not my Raiden, which is why Dark Raiden is done away with as quickly as possible in Mortal Kombat 11. The decision was made to essentially end with time travel since they started with time travel. So past versions of the characters are brought back. Kronika is the main villain who was teased in past endings, but is now revealed to be the one who was pulling the strings the entire series, including making sure Liu Kang and Raiden always turn against each other. In fact, Kilson said that every time there was a retcon or something that didn't make sense, that was Kronika resetting the timeline and changing things. While Liu Kang and Kitana are fixed, we ultimately end with Liu Kang defeating Kronika after being made a god by Raiden. And now Liu Kang must restart history with either Kitana or Raiden by his side. But Aftermath goes with the Raiden ending being canon, even though they could have swapped Raiden with Kitana at the beginning of Aftermath and not much would have changed, but I digress. So that leaves us with the so-titled Mortal Kombat 1, with Liu Kang starting a new era. What will become of that is unclear, but I have no faith NetherRealm will be able to avoid another reboot. So in my opinion, what doomed Mortal Kombat to reboot twice was this: over-reliance on shock value deaths, not respecting your character's histories, hence why we got things like Cyber Sub-Zero and Twin Dell from Mortal Kombat 11, and at the end of the day, just plain bad writing. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please hit that bell and subscribe button. If you want updates, follow me on Patreon or Discord, which are provided in the description below. See you next time.